Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for closing out your Dev Days with me. And I'm going to talk about a project that is really important to my heart, and that's patient requests for corrections. And a bit about me. There I am, all happy up there. I work at New York Presbyterian Hospital. Been working there quite a long time. Started out as a software developer. I also teach at Columbia University. And I have been active in HL7 for a really long time, very excited about FHIR, and I helped found with Dave DeBronkart the Patient Empowerment Work Group, and I'm currently a co-chair, and I'm also on the HL7 board. So our learning objectives for today is to describe the problems of errors in medical records, to discuss current correction process, to review our implementation guide, because we've created an implementation guide on patient requests for corrections, and summarize our current project status. And how you can get involved, and we could really use help. So why is this guide needed? Why is it important? Well, there are numerous studies that have been done that show that our medical records are riddled with errors. And the reason why our work group chose this project is we kind of had a prioritization exercise. And it sort of started, the prioritization exercise started at like a reception, an informal reception thing, where everyone's like, my error's wrong, my chart's wrong, my chart's wrong. And then we did our prioritization. This is right at the top, is that patients need a way to say, my record is messed up. It needs to be fixed. And they need to actually know that somebody's working on it and it's getting fixed. But I mean, the errors are just staggering. And I don't know if any of you have looked at your records, but I would challenge you to do this, your homework. You guys, it's homework. Go home, get your data, look at it, and I'm going to bet you're going to find something wrong. And then that's the step one. But the really hard step is to try and figure out how to get it actually fixed. And I mean, it's not just much like it's fixed for one visit, but get it actually fixed and struck off your record somehow. Good luck with that. And then when you decide you really want to get it fixed, at least if you're in the United States, I can help tell you how to really get it fixed when you find that you just can't even figure it out. And it won't be pretty. It's one of the best kept secrets in the United States, I believe. But it is required in the United States, it's required by law, and I think in Europe, you have GDPR, it is required that people fix errors in records. That's required. It's just that the process is very paper-based. So, but the errors are staggering. And now, with this amazing patient portals and then FHIR, people can get more and more data. So you get all this data, and then you get to see more and more errors, which is really frustrating, you know? And so you might want to say, this is wrong. And why do you need to say it's wrong? Because someone may make a decision on your care based on that data. A decision which could kill you, but also a decision where someone could have bias against you, you know, where they can treat you like, you know, everyone's treating you like kid gloves. Why is that? Because the record says, you know, this person is really anxious or something. There could be something in there. They could be not wanting to give you certain medications because the record says that you're a drug abuser or you smoke, or there could be something in that record that is somehow really affecting your care and how you're treated as a person and your payment. So it's very serious business. And the other thing is, so how many computer scientists people I'd have in the room, real geeks in the room? Okay, you know, when you start getting big data together and you try to do stuff, you know, you do all this really fancy stuff to try and get rid of the errors, right? Because you guys know the data's crap. You've seen it, right? And it's like, why do we have to do all this stuff on the back end? If, you know, wouldn't it be a little bit of help on the front end where someone's actually there, my data's wrong, hello? You know, I mean, that would make more sense if someone could actually clean it. I mean, I know that might be hard, but I mean, that's like the non-rocket science approach, but So there was this study in 2020 done in the United States, because in the United States we kind of took this big open notes movement, kind of spurred by a certain regulation we had. And in that, they got all of these clinicians to participate. And they told the clinicians, patients are going to be reading your notes, okay? And then these patients are reading the notes. So the doctors know the patients are reading the notes, mind you. Just think about that. And the patients read the notes, and 1 in 5 found that their notes were wrong. And then 40% perceived that the errors were serious, like, oh no, I had surgery on the other side, you know, like really serious stuff. And then this same study said that the way to correct the records was not aligned with the way of getting the records. And let's see if I have the quote in there. No, I have his face. Let's see. Sooner or later, I have to put his face. There is a quote in this article. I don't know if I have it in here, but the quote basically says there needs to be a better way to get the records corrected, because it doesn't align with what we have the technology now to actually get the data, and we're getting more and more, but we don't have any way for a patient to speak back using the FHIR interface. And all we're looking for is, can you please fix my record? And then can you keep me up to date on what you're doing with that? Even if it's taking you 2 months, can I at least know that someone actually has the ball and is running with it? And then maybe a back and forth communication, because I say I don't smoke, and then you want to say, yeah, but we see you did smoke. When did you quit smoking? Or some sort of back and forth communication, which is usually with medical records people maybe. It doesn't have to be with a doctor all the time. There's more people that work in a hospital than a doctor, right? And all those other people need to be empowered to be able to work with you. So yes, and then we have our Dave DeBronkart slide, where he, which is basically saying we're not equipping the clinicians when we allow them to have that wrong data in there.
The point here is that this isn't just a patient rights thing. No doctor can do their job if they're given bad chart data.
And then to make it worse, I am all about interoperability. Like, that's what I want. I want to see interoperability. This is interoperability of crap. That's what this is, right? It's so horrible. It's like, why does the whole world think you're crazy? That's because we've enabled that. We've enabled the I am crazy to go everywhere. And I don't want to offend anyone there that might have any mental health issues or anything like that. I'm very familiar to mental health issues myself, so I'm just making light of that. But still, I mean it actually very seriously. And then incorrect data, as you know, skews analysis. Skews analysis. And this I just mentioned already, that we now have these open notes. So yeah, and maybe I'm going to give you the answer here, I don't know. But how exactly does a patient get their error corrected? Now realize at the point when you want to say as a patient, doctor, my chart is wrong, I want to point out that a power dynamic occurs, right? Because it's like when you say, doctor, I think this is wrong, you sit there and think, is it really that big a deal? Because this guy's going to cut me open on Tuesday, right? And I don't want him to slip up. You know, we all worry about we don't want to make the guy at the fast food place mad at us because we don't know what they're doing in the back with our food, right? But this is they have your body open or something, so it's a different thing. But that power dynamic is really serious, right? And so how would a patient do this? This is a question. And I know these amazing patient advocates. People have made a business where you can hire them to advocate for you. And I know one of these people, and like, she actually has made a business trying to get people's records corrected in the United States. I mean, she can make money off it. Isn't that sad? Like, I'm glad she has a business doing it, but you know, and I think she would be very happy to put herself out of business, because it shouldn't have to be that way. And this is her story. I don't know if you guessed who this was, Bryn. It was a small community. And her story is in the front of our guide, and her name is Grace Cordovano. And she tells the story about how she gets her record, and it's wrong. And she tells them, can you please fix this? And they say, of course, Ms. Cordovano, we will fix your record. That's horrible. And they mean it. They probably mean it from their hearts. I'm not saying they don't mean it. And maybe they fix a part of the record, kind of like weeding by just cutting the top of the grass, the top of the weed, it doesn't work. You got to find out where it is and getting everywhere. Maybe they don't have power to fix the record because some other doctor put it in. Maybe who knows? Maybe they didn't tell her that there was some magical way through form or something. But this person she is someone who, she can get things done. She knows the system. She knows how to navigate it. She can't get a record fixed. And she calls this rinse, lather, repeat. Rinse, lather, repeat. My record will never get corrected. And I'm actually quoting her when she says that some doctor somewhere when I had cancer said I had anxiety, and now everyone goes like, yes, how can we help you? And said, I had cancer. I had a right to have anxiety. And then we talk a lot, and I talk a lot. I work for a hospital about clinician burden, and it's a very serious thing. If anyone here has been a patient with some serious chronic condition or a caregiver trying to take care of that person, you will acknowledge that there very much is patient burden. And there are studies on this. And in Bryn's slide, she showed that picture that it resonated with me so much, of the patient with the umbrella and the rain pouring down. It's like, not only, you're sick, but then you need to get my data from here to there. You need to go and you have to pick up an x-ray and move it over here. And then you also have to do all this. And then the billing stuff comes. You get this thing in the middle, you owe $40,000. I owe for this person who saw you for an hour. What? You're ready to jump out a window. And I'm not kidding. And then you call up, and then you get all this bureaucracy, and then talk to your insurance, U.S. thing. Talk to your insurance company. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your insurance company. Leave me alone. I'm not feeling well. So patients have burden. So we want to make it really easy for patients to do things. Here's the way. I'm giving you the answer in the U.S. There's a piece of paper in electronic form. Medical Records has 30 days to process that request, but they can ask for an extra 30 days. They don't have to tell you what they're doing, so you don't really know. But our guide is to make it easy to have a status reported. And they never have to communicate with you at all, talk to you. But we're going to try to make it really easy for people to talk back and forth, the patient and the person carrying out this request. And you're allowed to disagree. And supposedly your disagreement is supposed to go with you and sent to any other place that you want it to go to or wherever it's been shared before, as well as when the amendment is made. So, but this was written in a day when we were just starting to scratch the surface of electronic medical records. This was imagined for paper, and it has not yet been imagined for electronic health records. So there is no real concept of this disagreement and amendments flowing in interoperability, which means that maybe it's fixed on one system, or maybe you can say, I'm not crazy on one system, but the I'm not crazy still may not get everywhere it needs to go. Plus, a patient can say, I'm not crazy, and actually that's a conversation where you need to help the patient understand that they really are. Again, not trying to make light of it, but nothing wrong with that. Patients, that conversation's still very important. Like I said, even if it's not an error, as soon as a patient engages, they become activated and they're going to have better health. There's many studies on that. So yeah, this is the conclusion. I knew I had it in there somewhere. The findings suggest that inviting patients to report mistakes might actually make charts more accurate. And it's this I just want to know, because you probably didn't know that, but here is it from really smart researchers, okay, in case you didn't know that, yeah. And if we could develop efficient mechanisms to respond to such reports, wow, that seems to be important. And at this time when patient demand for data is increasing, along with federal support, so US-based here, for providing patients this easy access, this might really make sense that we actually give them a way to say their data is wrong. Maybe I didn't have the whole quote in there. So we decided in this work group that we wanted to create a way to do this. And we didn't want to, it's very important, because we had this long debates over this at the beginning. We're not trying to correct the record. I mean, we're not trying to say, we're writing into the record and fixing it, cross off crazy, put insane. We're not trying to say that. We're saying we want a way to make a request, a formal request. I think these parts of my record is wrong. Could you please fix it, you morons, whatever. And I mean, that's how a patient feels at that point, right? Already the patient is an unhappy person, right? So it's also I'm speaking with my hospital hat on, it is a point we're in service recovery. This is an unhappy patient and we want to make them happy. So it's to our benefit to make them happy. We're not happy that they're unhappy. So you're making that request, and then this guide is really going to provide, on the provider side, give them a chance to more efficiently give good service to that patient. Because then this implementation guide, using these apps, so you could have a patient app, and you've got data from 5 different doctors on different EHRs, and you could say, oh, that's wrong. Wait, it's wrong there. And I could push buttons, and I could get this correction thing going. And it's a way for that back and forth conversation to happen between the requester and the fulfiller, and to track status all the way through to completion. So I don't have to keep, where is it? Let me track my package. So in our implementation guide, you can find it out there. Our implementation guide has passed ballot. We're a standard for trial use, but we have yet to publish. And that is because we have, I believe we've resolved all of our negatives and positive comments. We might have a few more from our buddies in the Netherlands who did not give us a ballot response, but they actually are implementing it. But we are working on just updating the spec with all those changes. So hopefully we'll have it out in the summer. And part of that seriously has to do with the fact that we have a bandwidth issue in our group. So anyone who wants to help, feel free to help us. We have edits we're doing now. And this just shows like the scenario like I've been discussing. I see my record has an error. I request that it be fixed. There is the opportunity in the spec to go back and forth. When medical record says, when did you quit smoking? And the patient can say, this is when I quit. And then the patient can also track status. And for this first STU1, we're doing it all with polling and querying. So while we'd much rather have notifications and be able to say, okay, now your request is being triaged. Okay, now we've got a resolution here. We've accepted it. We've denied it. Here's the next thing you can do. We'd rather have that with notifications, but now we're just going to be like, you can query the status, but your app can query the status, not the patient. So the patient doesn't have to call up every day. Instead, the app is able to do that for them. So they can check their app, and their app says, no news yet, or look, it's moved on. So look, they actually got the request. Good. They're working on it. Or it's in your court because they want something from you. Oh, they're asking me a clarifying question. And sometimes requests are denied. So just be aware that it can happen. That they can say, we really think your record is correct. And then, at least in the United States, you have a right to say, with all due respect, I disagree with you. And then that would be formally logged. And then, suppose in the United States, then the doctor has a right to come, or the organization can then give you a rebuttal back. I've heard that I know of no one who's actually used that, but they could just keep going this way. But this is a paper process, like in a rule. This is not like some really great computer architecture here. That's really where the whole thing stops. And then you just make the request again. So we decided there are 2 actors. There is the correction requester and the request fulfiller. We did that to kind of make things a little more abstract, so to allow maybe the caregiver to make the requests, to allow the one who's fulfilling it to not be so exact. Like maybe you could do this with a payer app and say that there's something the payer has wrong. Hey, the claim looks wrong. So we don't want to have a healthcare provider organization. So we did that to just make it just a little more abstract. And then we have 2 resources that we use. We use both task and communication. And both of them serve really important roles. The task is how we track the status. And how, within the task, we have everything about this request. We have the initial request, and we have the final conclusion. And we have links to any back and forth communication that might have happened. All of that is right within task. And I just want to call out in this room Jeff, because Jeff's part of the team in developing this. So I'm looking at him because he can keep me honest if I mess up anything. because he's one of a key techie on this. And then we also have the communication resource. The communication resource represents each link in the conversation between the patient and the requester and the fulfiller. So if there's a whole bunch of back and forth communication, all of that is represented through communication. And this is sort of a picture that shows this. And this is one, we're actually redrawing this picture, I believe, in our guide, but it's still got the idea right. So you start out with a special operation, which is a correction request operation. And and the main resource in there is the communication resource. But you can send other things like a document, an image. You can take a picture of where on your portal it's wrong, or a document where, because we have one patient app actually allowed you to annotate things and then create a nice document and send it along. You know, whatever could go into that. And then that would create a task. And then the task is where you start managing status. And actually creating the task right now in the guide is optional. We don't really like that it's optional. We'd like every EHR to have it, but if there's a bare bones implementation, at least the communication lobbed it across in an electronic way, which is better than the paper and fax, right? So we're getting somewhere. But we think that task is really important. And then there is this ability to have these communication resources going back and forth. If there's any Q&A going back and forth, but which puts a human element into it, because we're really at a human element here where there's service recovery, if that makes sense. And then finally, you have a resolution where we're like, it's completed, it's fulfilled. And we're tweaking this in the guide a bit too, but we're actually turning this into 2-state machines. But we have a state machine which kind of shows what state you start in, request is queued, and then it kind of goes into review, and then it can be accepted, or it can be denied, and even if it's accepted, it still might not be completed, because we could decide we're going to make the change, but we haven't made the change yet, and so those are some of the states. And the states that are in here, the techies went through it, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to end up with 2-state machines, because the disagreement's a different workflow. But we also have an expert committee that we put together in our patient empowerment work group, where we have certain patient advocates that we don't bring into every call, like the calls where we argued over what resource to use. I don't know if you guys have ever been on one of those. Sometimes the patients get a little annoyed when they're in too much of the depths, but we bring them and say, does this make sense? So they were able to tell us, I'm like, should I have a state for this? And no, you don't need that. And so we were able to kind of get that. We both had experts that were patient advocates, but also medical records people. So we had both sides of the table. And then you would end up with, on the task, you have different versions of the task, of the different statuses, and then multiple communication resources linked together that represent the conversation. And this just shows some of our work. We actually went through, I think, 3 or 4 connectathons. We had quite a few connectathon tracks. Unfortunately, though, on those connectathon tracks, we did not have a single electronic health record participate doing coding. That didn't mean that we didn't have electronic health record people participate, and Jeff was one of those people, but he was not, I really wish I could write this code, but I can't today. We did have people from several major EHR vendors very involved in listening and participating, providing advice, and coming to weekly calls, but they never actually stood up code, which is a real problem. Like that really needed to happen. But we did have David Hay. I don't know if you guys know David Hay, really great member in the FHIR community. He created an entire reference server for us. So we do have a reference server. He probably doesn't have it up running right at this moment, but he'll turn it on if anyone wants to play with it. Just let me know, and or message him on Zulip, David Hay. And you can I can almost hear him as he's using it, because it kind of has his sense of humor here. But he shows things like, let's see if anything here shows it. I don't know, but sometimes it's like, you can just, he may put silly things in here. But this shows this, okay, actually this is probably is this the app or so here on the EHR perspective, please correct my record. I quit smoking. When did you quit? And then the patient responds, we'll be making that change. And So this kind of shows one side. This shows the it says patient perspective. And then you have the EHR perspective. So just okay, thank you. And I think I'm doing pretty good. I'm going to have plenty of time for questions. And then, so from the project, we started in the summer of 2020. And what we started in the summer of 2020, but we had it in our heart in 2019. But that's when we actually got, our project scope statement together and such. We had 4 connectathons. We have input from vendors and, like I mentioned, patient advocates, medical records professionals. We have 1 production implementation, maybe more than 1, but we have some implementation in the Netherlands. I don't know if there's anyone in the Netherlands who can tell me if I'm lying, but we work with Alexander Hankett. We completed ballot in May 2022, and we still haven't, like I said, gotten everything up to date in the spec, and we need to do that. And we're looking right now in the future of being able to make data types for the EHR to represent the amendment decision and that disagreement, so that could be communicated as well. So how do you get involved? Read our draft implementation guide. And you can find information on our project on Confluence. We have regular calls. We meet 4 p.m. Eastern. Maybe that's horrible for some of you. We could adjust that time. If people want to attend and that's bad, let us know. We'll see if we can find a better time. And we need all different kinds of people. I mean, I kind of cried for this at a working group meeting, and the people next to me said, I'll do it. I was great. I was going to cry more at working group meetings. But like needing, sometimes we need help with people who know how to navigate Jira, and, are able to, we had someone who was editing the implementation guide, and it was a patient who'd written his own app. He'd won the patient app contest. But he was participating with no funding from his job because he does not work in healthcare. But it was all about the fact that he's an e-patient, wants his data. That's why he was there, but he got a new job where he can't do it anymore. So someone else has sort of taken that over. But there's certain roles that, we can use whatever support we can, and we definitely can use technical help. So don't feel like you have to be have patient experience or carrier experience to be a patient advocate, to be part of our group. We need people to support us. Was the word allies. So, need both. And this is just a summary. We talked about the problems of errors in medical records, discussed the current correction process, like how it is today, and please go and try and fix your record. Reviewed the patient request for corrections, FHIR IG. I want you guys to all correct your record because people don't believe anyone has errors because no one's asking to correct them. Because no one asks us to fix our records. Summarize current project status and how to get involved. So that's what we should have done today. Hopefully that's accomplished. But questions, please ask me questions.
What? Yep.
What happens if a patient submits a condition of which the request fulfiller has no way of knowing if it's correct? So there's the Q&A, but I can imagine that the patient should actually see a doctor, because just with a Q&A you cannot say if it's correct or not. What will happen in this case?
So the patient makes a request.
Yeah, so for example, I make as a patient, I make a request, say I have some allergy, and then I submit that change, and then the request fulfiller has no way of knowing if that is accurate. Might be.
So there's a couple of things. One is, so first thing is whoever gets that request may not be a clinician, for example, so they might pass it on. But there are certain data fields that only the patient knows if it's correct or not, in some cases. So that, yeah, they might not know that about the allergy, but if a patient's allowed to self-declare that they have allergies, right? So if a patient says, you missed my allergy, That might be something that's, oh, the patient says they have this allergy, we're going to write it down.
So it's been a couple of years since I was involved in this project, but correct me if I get this right or wrong. It's important to note that this is called patient request for corrections. This is not the patient making a correction in the chart. And what this IG attempts is intended to automate is the existing, what they call the business process. Like, I am allowed right now to call my doctor's office and say, you're missing an allergy. All right, and then they have a certain length of time under the law right now to respond and say, no, you don't, or yes, you do. Or in my mother's case, some doctor mistakenly put in her record that she was diabetic. So she called the doctor's office and said, no, I'm not. And they had to go back and forth. And what this IG does is it doesn't change what the humans do at both ends. It just automates the back and forth. Is that correct?
Yep.
So does that answer your question? Because this IG doesn't touch at all on the social or business issue of saying, of the provider arguing or disagreeing. This is just automating the communication, yes?
Yes. And when
So for instance, one thing that is very obvious to me, if we imagine a world where this was implemented everywhere, people are reading their charts and finding maybe a dozen mistakes. So now imagine you have a hospital with 100,000 patients, which is not that big a hospital, 100,000 patients and a dozen mistakes each. Now all of a sudden they have a backlog of 1.2 million correction requests. So what we're going to see is there will be a big market for like dashboards to keep track of the traffic of correction requests. So that'll open up a market for a new kind of application, correct? Or I mean, you work at a big hospital. How will you guys manage that if you don't have software to keep track of all the requests? Because right now you don't, right? It's all just piles of paper.
or we don't get the paper.
So how do you manage?
People don't submit requests.
People don't submit them.
People don't submit requests. I don't believe that, I believe that 1 in 5 patients see errors in their records. I do not believe 1 in 5 patients are submitting requests. I think the amount of requests submitted are much lower.
So how would you manage it if you did?
It would be a problem. There's a workflow. There's definitely a workflow. Like in my hospital, we have a whole medical records workflow. There's definitely a way to do it. There is some computer software to support that workflow. Not in every hospital. I talk to different medical records departments. Some of them are doing with spreadsheets and folders. But there's a workflow. And there's definitely a workflow for when the doctor says the record's wrong. That goes right in, no problem. But for a patient, it's the way to request it is often a paper form, if maybe an electronic form, but it's a form. Or maybe there's a way to message on a portal, but it doesn't have the whole workflow behind it necessarily. And what we're trying to get to a world where, so I'm going to speak with my patient empowerment work group hat on, where that if you have data in from multiple doctors that are on multiple EHRs, that you should be able to have all of your data centered around you, and then you can make your requests instead of having to always go to that portal and that portal and that portal and that portal. So instead you can manage it in an organized fashion. Yes, Vrin.
Thank you so much for this. Every single consumer in our work group mentioned the problem of finding errors in their records and not knowing how to get them fixed. And one suggested, they're like, when you call the help desk or customer service desk, you get a problem ticket number or a job ticket number, that why can't they do that and the ticket's only closed if you agree?
That's exactly what this is.
The problem has been fixed. So then they're able to say, there's a problem, here's you get a ticket number. You know, I never had ALS. I don't know why this is on my record. I never took these medications. And so that they at least know that somebody's working on it and there's a queue for them. Because for most people, they will, I agree with you, the 1 in 5, most of them would not even take the time because they are so sick and they're spending so much time trying to get well that this is just one more thing on their list that they can't get to get it fixed.
So for me, like I could submit a problem ticket, right? I'd like sometimes I'm not sure exactly how to say it or whatever, or things are not going quite the way I wanted them to go. So then, you know, in the old days, what you would have to do is you'd have to call, right? If for whatever, you know, your airline, you know, it's like when you have to call the airline. Who can't wait to call the airline? Okay, right? But these days, there's usually a different way. There's the chat thing, right? Who likes chat? The little chat thing, it's so great, right? So that's the communication thing is that chat thing. So it's both of those features. And I can't tell you the emotional discussions about how both of those matter. Can you vouch for me, Jeff, on that? Yes.
We have a couple of online questions.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you. So first online question here is, now that the IG exists, how do you foresee driving adoption implementation by providers and payers? So
Advocates for this work have been talking about it, like I'm talking to you guys here, like I talked at the last DevDays. My co-project lead, Debbie Willis, has talked to, and Grace Cordovano, who's a sponsor, have talked in the U.S. in numerous places, kind of from a policy perspective, have advocated for it that way. We have talked about it in different countries. So, you know, we're talking about it, but I think that this is one of those things where, and the EHR vendors have definitely expressed an interest in doing it, but there is a priority issue here. And in general, one thing that makes this difficult, I want to tell you, the patient empowerment work group, all of our big priorities, because we love all this free the data thing, but a big priority in the group is, that's really great, but we'd actually like to say something and have you listen. We want to send in our vital signs. We want to send in our annotations. We want our correction. We'd like you to have our advanced directive so that you know what to do with me if I can't speak for myself. But there's one big problem with every single one of those things, and that is, it's not that clinicians and hospitals and doctors don't want to listen. It's just like they want to listen when you're in front of them in a visit, or the 15 minutes before. That's the time they have scheduled. That's the time perhaps they're getting paid for, right? When you have stuff that's coming in over on the sides like this, the workflow is not set up for that. And that is really, I would say, the elephant in the room here. Go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Unless I'm using your microphone.
Coming.
Thank you, Philip.
So I just want to say, and this is not anything that anybody could do anything with FHIR today, but I'm starting to sense that because of all the problems of getting hospitals to change how they do things, more and more workflows are going to start up where the data and applications exist outside of hospitals. For instance, in the New Orleans work group meeting, there were several sessions where the architecture they put on the screen showed an external data store that was getting its data from EMRs and from other places. And when we have the ability, all of us, not just patients, when we have the ability to create data storage systems that do what we want, what we need, right, and have data elements that we need, whether or not they exist, right, in the hospital's universe, things in the coming years are going to evolve to be more of what the doctors and patients and nurses and physical therapists and family members all need. And if this really, many people have said for years that we're approaching a Copernican revolution in healthcare. It used to be that the hospital was the center of the solar system and the patients circulated around, and that's going to flip, and I think FHIR is going to be a big reason for it, where the patient and their needs will be the center of it, and hospitals and everybody else will orbit around there. Personally, as part of this project, and I think I emailed it, but I don't know if you have it to put it on the screen, I just manually went to the 5 different hospitals where I get care for different things, and I manually copied my problem list and my medications, and I cross-referenced them, and it was a mess. They all disagree with each other. And the reason I stopped working on this, I just gave up, was number one, I knew it was going to be a horrible nuisance to get all 5 of them to do it. But then I also realized the next time, like there's one of my medications that my doctor and we just decided to stop it for a while. All right, well, if I want my records to be accurate, I have to go to all 5 of those places and tell them that. And then when we start it again, and so on. So I'm really looking for the automation that will be enabled when this is implemented, and I'm willing to have us finalize this and have it ready for use when system designers see the need for it, even if they don't today, because it's too much work for them today.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are finalizing it. We're just finishing the work. But you brought up
Am
another
I making
issue.
sense, or am I just making it seem like this whole thing is pointless?
We have registries of data. We have networks that hold data, and we have registries. My daughter, the state immunization registry does not have the correct sequence of immunization she's had. Now, we could go and say, we need to go back to every place that didn't send, make sure they send, get the correct thing. And maybe that's okay, but maybe that's like they went out of business. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be too hard at some point, because people will say this. You can't tell me the AHIE. I have to fix something. You have to go to the source. But there might be a point where that is appropriate, that a patient should be able to say, this collective thing you have in your registry is wrong. Like if I was depending as mom on the state immunization registry to say what the registries are for my child, which happened at multiple places. Because, during COVID in America, we could go to the pharmacies. We could go all over. But good luck getting that all together. It's a mess. Another thing is patients don't always work with healthcare providers in getting their care. When they want to share things, they might not want to just share it with their doctor. For me, the secret to my health and my sanity, and as well as the care I was able to provide for others, is patients and caregivers like me, is those communities. So there might be a sharing there that might matter. If you go to your doctor, like what Grace was doing, is she'd go to her doctor, she'd go to that front desk and say, can you fix this? It might be that a lot of times that even though that seems like the right place, I'll tell my doctor my record is wrong. That really might not be the right person to tell your record is wrong. The doctor actually has to go to the medical records department sometimes, because you could say my record's wrong. You say I have this symptom or this disease or this result doesn't. This is wrong, right? It turns out your data is intermingled with someone else's data. They've got to do a chart unmerge, which is a nightmare. So it could be a really serious problem, and medical records people are really good at that. They know how to handle that. It might mean that they have to go to 5 different doctors to get everything fixed. So it's not so simple. And sometimes what a doctor can do is they can really fix something superficial. On this visit, I will take off that problem. On this visit, I will take off that med, but the med stays on there to the end of time. But on this visit list, because EHRs have a concept of like the encounter, but then they have also this long-term thing that keeps coming back to haunt you. Or maybe it just matters that what you have 5 encounters before, that thing that happened last year that they're not working on now, it still says something horrible about you that's a lie, and that will keep haunting you. Yeah.
With that, we are at time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.